Hi students, I am going to walk you through the PowerPoint on asking the right questions, chapter 3. And this is chapter 3 in edition 11. It's actually chapter 2 in edition 12. So just make sure, depending on your edition, that you're reading the right chapter. It says, what are the issue and the conclusion? And this is really important when reading a text, that you will be able to identify the issue that the author is tackling and what their conclusion is. And as a writer, you must have an issue and you must have a conclusion when writing a college level paper. Okay, so the chapter goes over discussing the two types of issues and being able to recognize them. Being able to figure out what the issue is and figure out what the author's conclusion is, and then being able to use this in your own writing. And now that we're coming to write an argument, you are going to need to have an issue and you're going to need to have that conclusion. You'll see what I mean in a minute here. So what are the issue and the conclusion? So let's kind of talk about this here. So just you think of the issue, it's the question or controversy responsible for the conversation or discussion. So it is what makes the stimulus for what is being said. You should pause the recording here and you should repeat what the issue is a number of times, because the way that we do remember is by reading, writing, and by speaking. So just repeat what the issue is and really just don't say the words, but really try to understand that an issue is the reason that you're discussing something, or a controversy that's responsible for what you're discussing. And here are some examples. So for example, what is the issue with building the wall between Mexico and the US? Okay, so I think there's a number of issues. So in addition to the country's security, border security, there's also probably drug trafficking. There's probably the issue of immigration, illegal immigration. So there's a number of issues that connect to building that wall. And then what is the issue with full-term abortion? So if you've been listening to the news recently, one of the states said that a late term, I heard the day before the baby was due, could be legally aborted. So what is the issue with this matter of late term abortion when a baby in the womb, when brought outside the womb, could live? All right, so this, think about what kind of issues those are. And then what is the issue with hate speech at universities? There's very much in the news about people who are not allowed at universities because of their hate speech. But what is the issue with hate speech? And I'll leave you with that, okay? So I want you to think about that. Okay, so there are two types of issues, and it's really important that you know how to be able to identify them, because in identifying them, then you can figure out the best way to evaluate them. So the first one is this matter of being a descriptive issue, and I'll go back here. So the descriptive issue. All right, so descriptive issues are questions that raise questions about the accuracy of the past, the present, and possibly the future. Okay, so and in an article, they would be talking about history. They would be talking about current events, and they would be even kind of reflecting about what might happen because of them. The next issue is prescriptive, okay? And a prescriptive issue is one that deals with something that's right or wrong, or good or bad. And these questions usually start or include or infer this matter of should we do this, or ought we do this, or must we do this. Okay, so it's right or wrong, good or bad, versus the one that's descriptive, which is what happened in the past, what's happening now, what might happen in the future. So, so where to look for these things? Okay, so sometimes in an academic paper, the writer may tell you, but more than likely in a standard magazine publication or a journal publication, they are not going to tell you, be very clear about what the issue that they're dealing with. But you can take a look in the beginning, you can take a look in the title, and you can take a look at the end. So I direct my students to read the title and maybe the first couple paragraphs of an article, and then go all the way to the end of the article and read the last 2 or 3 paragraphs of the article. It's not like it's a fiction book. You're not going to ruin by learning that Colonel Mustard killed Miss Scarlet in the dining room with the lampstand. So in a nonfiction article, this is what you want to know upfront when you're reading. So try to find that issue right away when you start to read. Unfortunately, so the issue is not always stated, but it must be inferred. And in this case, these are the kinds of questions that you ask, okay? So take a look at the author, and you should be researching the author. And you should say, what is, we're going to read Nicholas Carr, and he wrote this article called How Smartphones Hijack Your Mind. So what is Nicholas Carr reacting to? So he is reacting to the seeing all these young people very distracted by the smartphone in their hand. Okay, so what is the author reacting to? And then what is the background of the author? So you should take some time, 5 or 10 minutes with your phone. You can do it so fast, not like my day when I had to go to the library and research these things, and investigate who the author is. So what other kind of publications do they have? What is their job? What's the past jobs? Where do they go to school? So Nicholas Carr is a Wall Street Journal journalist. He's written a book called The Shallows, and it talks about the effects of the internet on our minds. So he is not a fan of technology and its effect on the mind. Okay. So what is the overall question the article or essay answers? Okay, what's the link between the question and the essay article? So if you can't figure out the issue, come back to these questions. Remember that the mnemonics, that it was AAA, but it actually should be AAD. So you have to be able to be aware of the questions. You have to be willing to ask and to answer the questions, and then you have to have a desire. So here are the questions to ask, okay? And then locate the conclusion. We're going to talk about what the conclusion is in a minute, because we can't critically evaluate the essay until we know what the conclusion is. So it's a good question, right? We'll start now. So what is a conclusion as far as asking the right questions are? Okay, so the first thing is we are not talking about, see, I don't want to go anywhere here. It is not the last paragraph of an essay. I'm not talking about the last paragraph of an essay. Okay, so the conclusion is the message that the speaker or the writer wishes you to accept. And this is something that you should be repeating. So pause this video and repeat what the conclusion is. Picture in your mind that it is the message that the writer wants you to accept or to swallow, to believe. Okay? That's what the conclusion is. So what is the author trying to prove? Well, what is the author's main point, claim, assertion, or even argument? What do they want you to believe when you walk away from reading? Okay? So how do you determine the conclusion? You ask what the issue is, right? You look for indicator words. And in the book, in the chapter, they give you a bunch of indicators that give you words like consequently or therefore, and the likely locations for finding the conclusion. Okay, so take a look at what the book says. And then it's really good to remember what a conclusion is not. A conclusion is not a specific example. It is not a statistic. It is not a word definition. It is not background information on either the author or a study, okay? And it's not even evidence, okay? So check the context of the text and the author's background. You have to kind of know where the topic fits into history, who the author is. So the more you know about the author, about what they write on, about the issue, the better you are at being able to determine the conclusion if it's really kind of sneaky. Now, I did give you in the past the rhetorical situation, and I want to briefly go over it. This is really important for critical thinking. So in the rhetorical situation, there are 4 things that exist. There is the author, okay, who writes a text to an audience. Okay, so here's the author who writes a text to an audience, okay, based on a situation. So a lot of times if you figure out the situation, that's the author's reacting to a situation, and they're going to write a text, which is their reality, and then they're going to feed it to their audience. Say, accept this. This is true, okay? So if you think about the examples of Angela Duckworth's Showing Up from Grit, those of you who read it, it's an excellent chapter. I think all of you would benefit, so if you haven't read it, you should read it. We would talk about what is the issue. So the issue was this matter of why some people succeed and why people don't in any given kind of activity or any kind of difficult activity. And what is her conclusion? Okay, right? I think it's in the title of her book, right? It's this matter of grit. So she even says that talent is not an indicator of people being succeeding, but more grit. It's the example she gives with the West Point candidates with their boot camp and dropping out in that 5-week boot camp, even when they had to be such a great student and have really stellar SAT or ACT scores, have someone from Congress or a vice president or a president recommend them. They had to start in their junior year of high school, and still when they went, 50% of these students did not make, these candidates did not make it through West Point's The Beast, okay? So the issue and conclusion. And now we're going to be reading Nicholas Carr's How Smartphones Hijack Our Minds, all right? So that is the chapter on issue and conclusion. It's very important that you know the two. The chapter actually gives you some examples in the back of the chapter that you can go through, and it walks you through their reasoning for the first 2, and then the last one it leaves you to figure out. So please take the time to read those examples to figure out what the issue and the conclusion is with the help of the book.